Shortly after midnight on Saturday 30th of August 1997, Princess Diana and her boyfriend Dodi Fayed leave the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Henri Paul, the head of Ritz Hotel security, takes the wheel. The lovers are attempting to give the paparazzi the slip as they head for a Fayed apartment off the Champs-Élysées. It would be a fatal journey. A crash in a tunnel would kill Henri Paul and Dodi instantly. Princess Diana, the most famous woman in the world, would die soon afterwards. Had Diana not been involved, the crash might have been seen as a tragic accident. But within hours of her death, bizarre conspiracy theories appeared on the internet. Soon there were tens of thousands of websites devoted to Diana's death.
There remains a widespread belief that this official story of a kind of a run-of-the-mill tragic case of drunk high-speed driving really isn't the whole thing.
The question conspiracists raise around the world is, could this possibly have been a simple traffic accident, or was it something much bigger? And if it was, who was involved? Various theories have developed about dark forces instigating some form of homicide. Some conspiracists feel that the royals would have a great deal to gain by getting rid of Diana, because they would never accept a Muslim as the stepfather to the future king. It was an idea that had enormous international appeal. According to opinion polls, many people simply do not believe it was an accident.
She was such an extraordinary woman that people find it very difficult to accept that she could have died such an ordinary death. I think that's a problem that people have.
I don't know, I think it's all a bit too convenient for it to just be an accident.
I think they couldn't break her, she had to die.
She got too big for her boots, I think. She got too politically vocal.
Needed to be killed off, I think. The royalty wanted her out the way.
You know, the fact that, you know, it took the ambulance 2 hours to get to the hospital when it was only 10 minutes away, it's just too much going on.
A letter, allegedly sent by the princess to her former butler Paul Burrell, speculated about a plot to kill her in a car crash. Then the Daily Mirror revealed Prince Charles was the alleged plotter. Sales shot up.
So in terms of impact on circulation, Diana is twice as big since she died as she was when she was alive, and twice as big as anything else that we've touched. I mean, really quite extraordinary.
Conspiracy theories damaged the royal family's image and also harmed Britain's reputation in the Muslim world.
The Arab believe that the British intelligence service and the French intelligence service are working together to hide the truth and to cover the murder of the Princess of Wales.
And they give a reason for this plot because the British royal family would not accept a Muslim Egyptian stepfather for the future king of England.
Actually, our circulation increased by 25 to 30% because of this story.
High-profile deaths often produce conspiracy theories, but this crash has taken on a life of its own. We show how the Diana conspiracies have been constructed and taken root. One of the people who's been relentless in putting this into the public domain is Mohammed Fayed.
You know, very popular newspaper. 85% of the ordinary people of this country believe Diana was murdered with my son. It's not only me.
We examine and then take apart the widely believed conspiracy theories with new documents from the Paris investigation. We have the first ever TV interview with the head of the French police inquiry, and we speak to a witness at Princess Diana's autopsy. 2 days after the crash, French police revealed that Diana's driver had been more than 3 times over the drink-drive limit. 4 days later, there was a press conference at Harrods, Fayed's London department store. Doubts about the French findings were publicly voiced for the first time.
I remember it was very short notice, and we all arrived sort of rather breathlessly and crammed ourselves in and sat down, and no one quite knew what was going to be said. You know, it could have been the reading of one sheet of A4 paper saying, Mr. Al-Fayed would like to say thank you very much for the condolences, and he is or isn't going to the Abbey or whatever. But actually it turned out to be something altogether more extraordinary.
We owe it to everyone to now examine the evidence which you should see.
And then he produced a security video which blew everyone away. Certainly everybody was paying extremely close attention to what we were seeing because we knew it was something quite extraordinary. To see the footage of her, that distinctive blonde head in that sort of grainy video, there was something disconcerting about it.
Henri Paul did not have any appearance of being overexcited and drunk as a pig, a quotation which incidentally appears again in the Evening Standard this evening. You will see the evidence for yourself.
They also showed us this video, which they said proved that he wasn't drunk. And of course he didn't appear drunk, but then I know people who are drunk who seem extremely dignified when drunk. In a way, everything that you read since does come from that press conference, because that was when the Al-Fayed version of events was set out, and what he said subsequently has all been based very much on those key beliefs.
Dodi's father, Mohammed, was particularly sensitive to the royal's attitude towards his son's romance. He maintains forcibly that Prince Philip in particular would have been against the idea of his son ever being the stepfather of a future king. The romance, which had been closely followed by the world's media, had looked like it was getting serious. There were even rumours of an engagement, and public kisses made headlines around the world. An interview with Fayed after Diana died fueled the media frenzy. He claimed that the couple had phoned him from the Ritz just hours before the accident to tell him of their plans. They would be flying home and announcing their engagement the following day. So convinced is Fayed of the couple's intentions that he has put a ring on permanent display as an engagement ring at his London store Harrods. Diana's close friends find that difficult to believe. Rosa Monckton went to Greece with her only 10 days before she died.
Oh, we both decided we needed a holiday. And so off we went, just for 6 days. We left on the 15th of August. And some friends of mine lent us a little boat, tiny little boat. And we went off and had wonderful fun. She was happy, she was relaxed. We had just lots of girl talk, you know, when there's two girls together, you talk about things that matter. She talked about her new relationship with Dodi, and she talked about other relationships and her family and everything. We talked about everything. You know, it was very new. She was right at the beginning of it, and she was just enjoying herself. She was basically, in my view, and I actually put this to her, I said, what you're doing is having your teenage years now. You know, you're having fun, you're having a fling, and you're enjoying it, and so you should. But in my view, it was no more than that.
On the night she died, Diana phoned Richard Kay on his mobile. The Daily Mail's royal correspondent was her closest press contact.
I think she was happy, make no mistake about that. I think she had found a degree of happiness with Dodi Fayed that she hadn't found in other relationships, probably because, in my estimation, that it had been the first one she'd actually gone public with. And, you know, and hang the consequences. She was saying to the world, yes, I found someone, I'm very happy with them. But that's a completely different stage from we're going to get engaged, we're going to be married. I didn't get that impression at all. And this whole ring business, I've been very dubious about.
The jeweller who made the ring was unclear in a 1998 interview with Channel 4 about the ring's significance.
I don't know if it was an engagement ring. They come specifically for this ring, and they want this ring. They don't say nothing. I don't know absolutely nothing.
And immediately after the crash, not even the fired spokesman had any idea of the ring's significance.
What that ring meant, we shall probably never know. And if the planet lasts for another 1,000 years, I'm quite sure that people will continue to speculate about its significance.
But Diana herself had been very clear about the nature of the relationship when she spoke to Rosa Monckton.
She said, "I'm sure one of the next things will be a ring." And she said, "Rosa, that is firmly going on the fourth finger of my right hand."
So, no thoughts in her mind of an engagement?
Absolutely none whatsoever.
A part of the myth is that Diana and Dodi were not just engaged, but they had already looked round a prospective home, the Villa Windsor, just outside Paris, the former home of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. The villa's retainer, Gregorio Martin, told the media he had shown the couple around the villa and that they had spent nearly 2 hours there, looking at every detail. His account was the last straw for villa security guard Ben Morel, who left his job in 1998 and told his story to the Sun newspaper.
At the Villa Windsor, Mr Al-Fayed had claimed that they had spent several hours looking round the villa with a view to moving there and possible marriage. Now, when we spoke to Ben, he was able to produce several CCTV camera shots which are able to conclusively prove that Diana spent less than half an hour at the villa, as opposed to the 2 hours that Mr Al-Fayed had been claiming.
And what is more, the retainer, Gregorio Martin, who had so vividly recalled the couple's visit for the media, had not even been there at the time.
He wasn't there, this retainer Gregor. He had, in fact, had an accident on the way back from Spain. The only person at Villa Windsor the day the Princess of Wales and Dodi came to visit was Ben Morel.
The Sun published a front-page story exposing the deception. It was a headline Fayed tried but failed to stop in the High Court. Soon after Diana left the villa, she spoke to her confidant, Richard Kay.
She mentioned that during the day they'd been out to the Bois de Boulogne and been to the Windsor house Duchess of Windsor lived in. And I asked her, well, what was it like? She said it was full of old ghosts. And I thought that's a very telling phrase. And not for you, she said, not for me. I've heard many stories about where they may or may not have lived, and I don't think she would have lived anywhere that would have taken her too far away from her sons, and her sons were in England.
So Diana was not planning to get engaged to Dodi Fayed, nor was she planning a new life with him. But the next and most sensational claim was that she was pregnant by Dodi when she died. Many believe this would have been more than enough motive for murder. The rumour that Diana was pregnant fitted neatly into the romantic picture of her future with Dodi. The purported pregnancy gave ammunition to those who were looking for a motive for murder. It would have been enough to galvanise the British establishment, which it was thought could not tolerate a Muslim brother or sister for the future king. Mohammed Fayed is certain that Diana was pregnant by his son, and he has claimed that Dodi definitely confirmed this to him. A photo taken that summer appears to show Diana with a possible bump. That was enough to start the rumours after she died. But what's the evidence? Channel 4 has spoken to people who know.
Do you think it's possible she could have been pregnant?
No, I know for an absolute fact that she could not have been pregnant. Because when we were on the boat, which was 10 days before she died, she had her period. So she could not have been pregnant.
On her last day in England, Diana visited Dr. Lily Yu. She had treated the princess here in Camden for 18 months for premenstrual tension.
Diana saw me on the 21st of August, and she was not pregnant then. It would not have been possible for her to be so when she died.
The crucial medical evidence comes from her autopsy. Diana's body was flown home to Britain on the day she died, and her post-mortem took place at the Fulham Mortuary in London. Working with the Home Office pathologist was the mortuary manager, Robert Thompson. He speaks to British TV for the first time.
Diana's body didn't arrive until 8 o'clock in the evening, so it was a very long day. We simply finished Dodie's post-mortem, cleaned down, disinfected the mortuary and prepared it for Diana's arrival. The internal examination proceeded much as they always do. The organs were removed, in this case, as they always are, by the pathologist, Dr. Chapman, with myself only providing assistance where necessary. Dr. Chapman removed the organs and then examined them on a dissecting bench very closely. Dr. Chapman and I were standing opposite each other over the body. Dr. Chapman, in situ, divided the uterus, looked up and said, "Oh, well, she wasn't pregnant," in a voice that was not just directed at me, but at the room in general. It's quite normal to divide the uterus, that is, to cut open the uterus to see any conditions that might be present. Cancer, pregnancy, any of these things might be present in the uterus. So it's quite normal practice in every post-mortem on a female of childbearing age to open the uterus.
Also at the post-mortem was former Royal Coroner Dr. John Burton, who recently stated categorically that Diana was not pregnant. Channel 4 has discovered that the only post-mortem that took place was in Fulham. The French medics had more pressing concerns when Diana was admitted. Thierry Maurès was the hospital spokesman at the time of her death.
When this type of patient arrives, pregnant or not, the only goal of the hospital is to save her life. And when you don't know the blood group, you don't do a blood test, you give what we call universal blood. We always have a reserve of blood which can be given to anyone without any problem. So our sole concern was not to discover whether she was pregnant, but to save her life. We didn't do any tests to see if she were pregnant, so no one can know whether she was or not.
So what of that photograph which started the rumour? It turns out to have been taken on the 14th of July 1997, before Diana had met up with Dodie in France for that romantic summer. But the rumours persisted. The respected crime writer Patricia Cornwell interviewed Mohammed Fayed in 2003. He told Cornwell that he knew Diana was pregnant because she herself had phoned him to tell him the news. So the rumour mill ground on. Meanwhile, an exhaustive 2-year French investigation left no room for doubt. Blood tests concluded that the driver of Diana's car was more than 3 times over the drink-drive limit. He was also taking prescription drugs, which warn users not to drink. He lost control of the Mercedes as it sped into the Alma Tunnel at more than twice the speed limit. The French investigation found a Ritz bar bill for 2 glasses of Ricard for Paul's table. Princess Diana's bodyguards said they were unaware that Paul was drinking alcohol, as his Ricard looked like pineapple juice. Paul's autopsy made it clear that he had consumed far more than those 2 glasses. CCTV footage from the Ritz on that fateful night has been used repeatedly to show that the driver, Henri Paul, had no appearance of being drunk, and that in these staccato pictures he is seen acting perfectly normally. So, the conspiracists argue, they must have taken the blood samples from someone else. Could the official investigation itself be contaminated? Channel 4 approached the head of the French police investigation to find out. Jean-Claude Moulez secured the crash site on the night and later attended Henri Paul's autopsy. In his first ever TV interview, we asked him, could there have been a blood swap?
Impossible. The rigor with which the sampling procedure is conducted body by body make it impossible. Every corpse has a reference, a registration number, a name, a forename, and a registration number.
Numéro d'enregistrement. À partir de là, les services, disons, administratifs.
In addition, the administration prints a sticky identity label. First name, registration number, all of which are done in real time.
À identifier les prélèvements qui sont faits en temps réel.
Henri Paul's parents were shocked at the idea of their son being drunk, so the investigating judge Hervé Stéphan double-checked the results. He personally supervised the analysis of a second set of samples from Paul's corpse. To remove all doubt, he recorded the entire process on video.
The second set of results on the autopsy confirmed within a tenth of a milligram the first set.
Other findings from the autopsy were selectively leaked. It is argued that the blood must have been taken from the wrong man, as there was a strangely high level of carbon monoxide in Paul's blood. Had his level been that high, he would have appeared unstable and hardly able to walk. There were two levels of carbon monoxide taken from two parts of the body. One was high, 20.7%, and one was low, 12.8%. Averaged out, they would be consistent with a heavy smoker. Henri Paul was seen smoking throughout the evening by both bodyguards and paparazzi. The French investigation concluded that the levels were of no significance. Commander Moulez has no doubt about the conclusions.
Personally, I go back to the authority of the judge's findings. It was a traffic accident, which is sad. But from the legal point of view, a traffic accident, as I've said. Full stop.
Immediately after the accident and before any facts were known, the investigative journalist Tom Bauer penetrated the closed world of the Ritz.
And I was told to report to an airfield where the Harrods helicopter would be taken off. We got to Paris. I was taken straight to the Ritz. I waited around for about an hour, and then I was taken into a room and told this is where all the staff will meet you. And one by one, all the senior staff, the low staff, everyone who'd come into contact with Diana and Dodie on that fateful day were brought into the room for me to interview. The atmosphere in the Ritz, you can imagine, was pretty tense. The staff were absolutely shaken. It was an extraordinary opportunity to sit there and talk to them all, even before they talked to the police. The police hadn't yet got to the Ritz. So I sat and talked to them one by one as they came in.
Bauer discovered by talking to bodyguard Kes Wingfield the critical decisions that had immediately preceded Diana's last journey. They were decisions that would haunt Fayed forevermore.
The key point was that they had agreed secretly between Dodie and Mohammed on the phone very late at night that to avoid the paparazzi they were going to conduct this extraordinary escapade using a hired car from the back of the Ritz, driven by Henri Paul to escape the paparazzi.
Henri Paul was acting head of security at the Ritz and not a licensed chauffeur. But in the phone call, Mohammed Fayed personally sanctions the plan for Paul to drive. Closed-circuit TV picks up the story. The bodyguards insist that at least one of them should be in the car. After an argument, Dodie agrees to take Trevor Rees-Jones. The party leaves by the back door with Henri Paul, but without the normal backup car. the two fully qualified official chauffeurs are left at the front of the hotel. The rest is history.
This was one of his cars going from one of his hotels to one of his apartments, you know, with one of his security men at one side of the car and his driver at another side. Obviously, I think Mohammed Al-Fayed will every day wish he'd done something different. This is a guy who's incredibly powerful, incredibly rich, who can do anything he wants within reason, and he was unable to stop this happening.
He had to explain why he'd agreed late at night to this madcap scheme to take her out the back door with a drunken driver in a rented car at ludicrous speed across Paris. There's so much for him to explain, and it is natural to Mohammed Fayed, when he's in that sort of situation, to come up with all sorts of conspiracies and stories and scenarios which don't fit the truth, but actually do protect his own reputation.
I already mentioned it, and I'm mentioning it all the time. It is absolute black and white, horrendous murder.
Before Princess Diana's body had left France, two top Fayed officials visited the Paris police headquarters to convey some potentially crucial information. They told the gendarmes that Dodi had allegedly received death threats, thereby sowing the first seeds of conspiracy theory. Channel 4 has seen a new, as yet unreleased video documentary produced by Mohammed Fayed. It's called The Alma Tunnel Mystery. It maintains that there are just too many unanswered questions surrounding the crash. It claims the British royal family has a long history of murdering opponents who disagree with it. It accuses Prince Philip of having Nazi links in his past and of masterminding the plot to murder Diana through secret agents from MI6. These claims have fallen on sympathetic ears, appealing especially in Arab countries.
It will be extremely difficult to convince the Arab world that it was a car crash. And it wasn't really, there wasn't any plot to kill the Princess Diana. Simply because, actually, first, the Arab people are stubborn. Second, actually, they don't like, although don't trust the British government or the British intelligence service. But in the Arab world, people are great believer of conspiracy theory. And when, as I said, the dream, this nice dream, a fairy tale, a princess, beautiful one, is going out with Egyptian dark-faced chap, they were extremely happy for that. It is like children's stories, to be honest. So suddenly this dream, this could not come true.
Other conspiracists have taken the story further, like the American Jeffrey Steinberg. His organization believes the royals are involved in all sorts of international conspiracies, and that the Queen is the head of a cocaine ring, and that MI6 is her personal secret service. His acute eyesight managed to spot the MI6 agents on Ritz video pictures, waiting in the crowd just before the crash.
There were two men in the Place Vendôme in front of the hotel from the point that Diana and Dodi arrived right up through the point that they left. And these two people have not been identified by anybody. They were not guests in the hotel, they were not tourists, they were not paparazzi, and they were clearly there at the edge of the crowd surveilling events for a good 2.5 hours. If, and I emphasize the word if, we are dealing here with a professional assassination, a target of opportunity, a decision by a highly professional team on the spot, the kind of thing where you could activate something and still have the option of calling it off at the last minute.
One theory that gained enormous credibility was the idea there had been a flash before the crash, which had in some way destabilized and blinded the driver. A motorcyclist was apparently seen overtaking the speeding Mercedes and producing an enormous flash. This idea was soon followed by claims that there were well-known anti-personnel devices which were used by secret agents to shine light in people's eyes and blind them. It was even said to have been used in an alleged plot to kill the Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic in a tunnel car crash. The evidence that such a device might have been used in the Paris crash came from a single witness, François Levistre. He claimed on British and US TV that he had actually been in the Alma tunnel and he had witnessed the flash before the crash. Channel 4 has discovered that Levistre is a convicted petty criminal. His account matched no other witnesses, and the French police discounted him as a reliable source. We showed his TV interview to the head of the Paris police investigation, Commander Moulez. He did not believe Levistre.
It was a big white light like this one, but quick, and it's then, when you're in the tunnel, and on top of that in the dark, you can see, you're forced to. It's like a race.
C'est hallucinant.
It's staggering. It's someone's mind playing tricks, imagination run wild. I would call this, in my opinion, nonsense. That this witness might have seen some flashes, okay. Some paparazzi overtaking him, perhaps.
Did you ever hear this allegation made by this witness, François Levistre?
Yes, now I'm starting to remember. I remember, and he wasn't the only one. There were many people who wanted to make themselves out to be more important than they were in reality, who needed to make up stories and tell things to show off. But very quickly their testimonies, which were handled with extreme caution, were destroyed from start to finish. This is the job of the examinations that we do at the Criminal Brigade. We take everything through right to the end, and we see if the person, the witness, is credible or not. We have ways through questioning to separate what is well-grounded from what is imagination, storytelling, which is his way, and it never fails.
Key to another conspiracy theory is the role of a white Fiat Uno, which was seen by two witnesses leaving the tunnel. The Fiat's paint marks were found on the wrecked Mercedes. The fact that the Fiat has never been found has added to the mystery. Some suggest it was used as a murder weapon.
Vehicular homicide would imply basically that this was a willful intent to cause a collision that would either be fatal for the passengers in the car, in the Mercedes, or would at least severely injure the people in the car.
Other critics of the investigation were astounded that the French could not find the elusive Fiat.
You've got the biggest car hunt of all time. Why couldn't you find it? Why didn't you get off your asses quicker and get it? You know, I just think it's a perfectly valid criticism. But that failure, we have to accept, has added even more fuel to the conspiracy fire, because you take that car out of the equation, then you're left just with Henri Paul losing control and whacking a pillar and the accident happening, and there's no third-party involvement that we can establish as a fact. We now have an absolute fact that there was a third-party involvement. There was another car.
A £1 million reward was posted on the Fiat website as payment to anybody who could find the missing Fiat. No one knows how many hits the site attracted, but before long, Fiat's head of security had managed to track down the car that had eluded the biggest French car hunt in history. It was found in Paris itself and traced to a paparazzo, James Andonson. Andonson turned out to have an immediate connection to the events. He had been photographing Dodi and Diana in the south of France. Then the mystery deepened when he apparently committed suicide, setting fire to himself and his car on army land. Some friends were allegedly skeptical about the way he died, which fueled speculation about the possible forces of darkness. Commander Moulez personally interviewed James Andonson, and he found his Fiat off the road and on blocks.
He was using the Fiat way before, certainly before 1997, since the car had 325,000 kilometers on the clock. When a car like this has done 325 or 400,000 kilometers, it's given up the ghost. And that's why he had placed it on bricks, and he wasn't using it anymore. I believe the car wasn't even insured, so that explains it.
Forensic tests proved decisively that the paint did not match the car that had hit the Mercedes. French scientists also established that the speed of the Mercedes had caused the crash rather than its brush with the Fiat. Channel 4 has obtained evidence and police diagrams that illustrate the crash between the Mercedes and the Fiat. It shows the position of the broken tail light of the Fiat and the glass from the wing mirror of the Mercedes. We showed the diagrams to the leading British car crash expert, Dr. Murray Mackay.
The marks, for example, on the right side mirror of the Mercedes would have come from the left rear corner of the Fiat Uno, and that the brake light cover on the Fiat Uno would have been damaged, consistent with marks on the right front wing of the Mercedes. So they were able to establish that this was a minor scrape, a glancing contact, that wouldn't have deviated the path of the Mercedes significantly. It's just a brushing contact, that it wasn't a major impact in any sense.
So the Fiat Uno could not accurately be described as the cause of the crash?
I don't think so. I think it's an incidental event. The car is clearly being driven at very high speed. The entrance to that tunnel is a little challenging in the sense that you have a dip that you go over a rise down into the tunnel itself. At the same time, you have a left-hand bend. If you're driving at high speed, if you're drunk, then it's easy to get out of control.
The Fiat Uno was not going very quickly. And you also realize that for a car going at high speed, there is a slope at 6 degrees and a kind of bump, which might have unbalanced the Mercedes, or at least Henri Paul's driving. Henri Paul, who perhaps was surprised to lose control of his car, and on top of that the brush with the Fiat Uno, we know the rest.
Despite the French forensic conclusions, the failure to find the Fiat harmed the reputation of the investigation and provided much scope for attacking French competence. The French emergency services also came under attack. No one appeared to understand how the French medics worked. When the ambulance crew arrived, Diana's condition was extremely serious. She had sustained major injuries and her life hung in the balance. Critics could not work out why it then took the ambulance 1 hour and 43 minutes to reach a hospital which was just under 4 miles away. Was this incompetence or part of a plot to ensure that Diana died? French records show 2 ambulances arrived just 6 minutes after the crash. So how did it take nearly 2 hours to get Diana to a hospital? The president of the emergency ambulance service is Dr. Marc Giraud.
At the very beginning of her situation, she had a heart attack, and she had to be treated before going to the hospital. Otherwise, she would have died on the scene. She was resuscitated at the moment she had this heart attack, but after that she had blood pressure problems, and when you do not have a good pressure, you have to be very prudent, very slow in the driving to transport a patient in this condition, and they have to treat the patient during the transport. So it is the way we act in France.
French policy is to treat patients in state-of-the-art ambulances, particularly when their condition is critical, whereas the Americans and the British prefer to race victims to hospital as quickly as possible. Diana was not taken to the nearest hospital, but to the best one for treating her condition. Then it was the turn of the French police to come under attack for reopening the tunnel so soon after the accident. Once the tunnel had been examined, it was washed down and open to traffic within 24 hours. Conspiracists argue that the scene of an accident of this magnitude would normally have been preserved for much longer. In their eyes, the speed of cleanup pointed to a cover-up. So was the tunnel cleared too quickly? Commander Moulez took that decision.
La scène a été préservée dès l'accident.
The scene was preserved straight after the accident until I arrived. When I arrived, I continued preserving the scene. But once my work was done, there was no reason. I had not found anything else. I wasn't going to seal off the tunnel and stop the traffic. It's unthinkable. The procedures which I put into effect were very, very precise. Nothing was left to chance. We combed it millimeter by millimeter. No other element significant to the investigation could have been discovered. I had no reason, once the Mercedes had been taken away, to plug the scene. I wasn't going to turn it into a shrine.
Did Commander Moulez make the correct decision?
Well, I can't see that there was anything lost in, for example, the time that was spent at the scene and then when you're finished, as is typical with any even fatal road accidents. You know, the scene is cleared, it's time to get traffic moving. You record the evidence photographically, you take measurements, you collect components, debris at the scene. I can't think that there was anything more that would have been achieved had they kept the tunnel closed for another 24 hours.
Yet another myth dispelled by the facts. From the moment Diana died, there has been disinformation about the crash. Fayed spokesman Michael Cole claimed at that first press conference that Fayed had received Diana's last words and had seen her body in the hospital.
Mr. Al-Fayed also visited Princess Diana and said she looked peaceful and serene.
Fayed did briefly visit the hospital, but could he have penetrated the tight security?
I very much doubt it, because as far as security was concerned, it was so tight that even for me to get near the body, I had to pass through various checks to prove my credentials, even when Professor Lecomte was expecting me to help her. So I sincerely doubt that anyone else could have. You needed a passport to get anywhere near Diana.
This myth was the first amongst many. Fayed had spent more than £5 million on propagating conspiracy theories with no evidence to support them. Although none of his legal actions over the crash have succeeded, his PR offensive has been very effective in the court of public opinion. He now claims 85% of British people believe there was dirty work afoot in the Alma Tunnel.
I think the Fayed campaign has been brilliant in its achievements. One may dislike the methods, but the way in which, over the years, more and more people have come to believe Mr. Fayed's explanation and theories about what happened that dark night, to the extent of accusing Prince Philip, whom we now know was actually much more on Diana's side than anybody realized, illustrates what have been called the dark arts of public relations and news manipulation, and that much overused word, spin.
The effect of the spin is to draw attention away from that fatal phone call which determined Diana's fate. Although Fayed's version of the conversation changes frequently, the bodyguards never change their story. Fayed personally permitted Diana to be driven by his head of Ritz security, Henri Paul. They sped away from the hotel with a fraction of the security that Fayed always insists on for himself.
You know, her whole life was, you know, people always spun stories about her. I mean, so often when I picked up a newspaper and read somewhere where we'd been together, there was hardly any truth in it at all. It happened throughout her life and it is continuing to happen after her death. People like to invent things.
Mohammed Fayed declined to take part in this program, saying he had grave concern about the motivation and agenda of those making it. His statement continued,
"I have not been given the opportunity to view this film. The proper forums in which all of the circumstances relating to the deaths should be investigated are, of course, the coroner's inquest, the related police inquiry, and most importantly, in a full public inquiry for which I continue to press. I have no intention, therefore, of subjecting myself to trial by media, particularly when, as in this case, the views expressed and the conclusions reached are so subjective and unbalanced when set against the very many important unanswered questions and suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths. I know the vast majority of the British public does not accept that Diana's and Dodi's deaths were a mere accident, and, as the grieving father, I certainly will not rest until I have uncovered the truth. It is regrettable that neither Martin Gregory, the producer of this programme, nor Channel 4 shares this ambition."
Diana's and Dodi's separate inquests have now opened to massive international media interest. They will resume next year after the Royal Coroner, Michael Burgess, has been painstakingly through the French evidence. He has asked the Metropolitan Police to investigate allegations of murder. And so finally, the conspiracy theories may be tested in a British court.